Most parents think their children don't listen because they're disobedient. But what if I told you the real reason is something parents do every single day, and they don't even notice it? Let me ask you a simple question. Have you ever repeated the same instruction to your child 5 times and still nothing happens? You say, "Clean your room," no reaction. You say it again, still nothing. Then your voice gets louder. Now there is tension, and suddenly the situation turns into conflict. This is not a discipline problem. This is a psychological pattern, and it starts much earlier than you think. I have studied family behavior for years, and one of the most common patterns I see is this: children do not ignore parents. They adapt to them. Let me explain. Imagine a child hearing the same instruction again and again, but nothing happens if they ignore it the first time, or the second time, or even the third time. Eventually, the child learns something very important. Instructions are optional. This is how the brain works. It looks for patterns, and once the pattern is clear, it follows it automatically. Now here's the dangerous part. Parents think repetition increases authority, but in reality, repetition without consequence destroys authority. Let me give you a real-life example. A mother tells her son, "Turn off the tablet." The child keeps watching. She repeats it. Nothing changes. She repeats it again. Still nothing. After the 4th time, she walks over and takes the tablet away. Now, what did the child learn? Not, "I must listen," but "I have 4 chances before anything happens." This is behavioral conditioning, and it is extremely powerful. Children are not resisting you. They are learning your system and following it perfectly. Now, let's go deeper. There is another layer most parents completely miss: emotional tone. Children don't just hear words, they read emotional signals. If your voice sounds unsure, if your body language is weak, if your message is inconsistent, the child senses it immediately, and their brain makes a decision. This is not important. Let me ask you something uncomfortable. When you say something to your child, do you expect them to listen, or do you hope they will listen? Because children feel the difference, and that difference changes everything. Authority is not built on words, it is built on certainty. Now, imagine a different scenario. A parent says something once, calmly, clearly, and with full certainty, and then acts immediately if needed. No repetition, no emotional explosion, just consistency. In this environment, the child learns a completely different rule: words matter. And this is where everything starts to change. But here comes the real problem. Most parents are too exhausted to be consistent. They are tired, busy, emotionally drained, so they choose the easier path: repeat, wait, hope, and react emotionally, instead of acting intentionally. And children adapt to that pattern very quickly. Now, let me show you something even more important. Listening is not just about discipline, it is about connection. When a child feels disconnected, they stop responding, not because they want to rebel, but because the relationship is weakened. Think about it. Would you listen to someone you feel distant from, even as an adult? Probably not. Children are no different. They just express it differently. Silence, ignoring, avoidance. These are not random behaviors, they are signals, and most parents misinterpret them. They see disobedience, but the child is showing disconnection. Now, here is where it becomes critical. The more parents push, the more the child withdraws. The more the child withdraws, the louder the parent becomes. And suddenly, you're trapped in a cycle that slowly damages both authority and emotional bond. So the real question is not, "Why doesn't my child listen?" The real question is, "What is my child learning from me every day?" Because whether you realize it or not, Your child is always learning from your tone, from your reactions, from your consistency, or the lack of it. And this learning shapes their behavior much more than any rule you try to enforce. But this is only the surface of the problem, because there is a deeper psychological mechanism that explains why even good parents struggle with this, and why children sometimes ignore even the most loving ones. In the next part, I will show you the hidden mistake that actually pushes children to stop listening completely. And once you see it, you will never communicate with your child the same way again. Now let's talk about the mistake that almost every parent makes, even the most caring ones, even the most educated ones, and it silently teaches children to stop listening. This mistake is called over-explaining. It sounds harmless. It even sounds right, but in reality, it weakens your authority. Let me show you how. A parent says, "Please clean your room because it's important to stay organized, and we talked about responsibility and you need to learn discipline." While the parent is still speaking, the child has already stopped listening. Why? Because the brain of a child processes instructions very differently. The longer the message, the weaker the impact. Clarity creates action. Complexity creates resistance. Now imagine a different version. Clean your room. Pause. Eye contact. That is it. No lecture, no emotional pressure, no long explanation. This is how authority sounds, and children respond to it much faster. But here's the deeper psychological layer. When you over-explain, you unconsciously ask for permission. Your tone becomes softer, your message becomes negotiable, and the child senses it instantly. Let me ask you something. Have you ever noticed how children behave differently with different adults? With one parent, they argue. With another, they listen immediately. Why? Because children are constantly scanning for structure. Who is clear? Who is consistent? Who actually follows through? And who does not? Now here comes a critical insight. Children do not test you to be difficult. They test you to understand the boundaries of their world. Testing is not rebellion, it is learning. And if the boundaries are unclear, they will keep testing, again and again and again, until the system makes sense. Now imagine this scenario. A child asks for something. You say, no. The child insists. You explain. The child pushes more. You explain again. Eventually, you give in. What did the child learn? Not persistence, not negotiation, but something much more dangerous. If I push long enough, the answer changes. This creates a long-term behavioral pattern, and this pattern follows the child into adulthood. Now let's go even deeper. There's another hidden factor: emotional inconsistency. Sometimes parents react calmly. Sometimes they explode. Sometimes they ignore behavior. Sometimes they punish it. From a psychological perspective, this is the most confusing environment for a child, because the brain cannot predict outcomes. And when outcomes are unpredictable, the brain stops taking instructions seriously. It shifts into survival mode. Wait and see what happens. This is why some children seem to not care. It is not that they don't care, it's that the system feels random. And random systems do not create respect, they create anxiety or indifference. Now let me show you something very important. Respect is not built through fear, and it is not built through endless explanations. Respect is built through predictable structure. Say it once, mean it, follow through. Every time, no exceptions. This is what creates psychological safety, and safety leads to cooperation, not control, not pressure, but cooperation. Now here's where many parents get it wrong. They believe connection alone is enough. They try to be friends with their children. They avoid conflict. They avoid firmness because they are afraid to damage the relationship. But in reality, lack of structure damages the relationship much more. Children need warmth, but they also need boundaries. Without boundaries, there is no respect, and without respect, there is no listening. Now, let me give you a real-life pattern I often see. A parent says something. The child ignores it.
The parent repeats it. The child delays. The parent gets frustrated. The tone changes. The situation escalates. And now both sides are emotional. At this point, learning stops, connection weakens, and the original instruction becomes irrelevant. This is not a communication problem. This is a system failure. And most parents are trapped inside it without realizing. But here's the good news. Once you understand the system, you can change it. And the change does not require shouting or punishment or control. It requires something much more powerful: clarity, consistency, and emotional stability. But there is one final piece, and it is the most overlooked one. It explains why even consistent parents sometimes struggle, and why some children still resist even in structured environments. In the next part, I will show you the hidden emotional trigger that shuts down listening completely and how to fix it in a way most parents never think about.
Now we reach the most important layer, the one that changes everything. Even if you are clear, even if you are consistent, even if you stop repeating yourself, there is still one factor that can completely shut down a child's willingness to listen: emotional safety, or the lack of it. Let me explain. When a child feels criticized, controlled, or constantly corrected, their brain does something automatic. It stops cooperating and starts protecting. This is not disobedience. This is a neurological response. The brain shifts from learning mode to defense mode. And in defense mode, listening disappears. Now think about this carefully. How often do children hear instructions compared to appreciation? Do this. Don't do that. Stop. No. Why did you do that? Day after day, instruction after instruction, correction after correction, and very little recognition, very little validation, very little emotional connection. Over time, the child builds an internal belief: I am always doing something wrong. And when this belief becomes strong, they stop trying to cooperate, because cooperation no longer feels rewarding. It feels exhausting. Now let me show you a powerful example. A father constantly corrects his son. Sit properly. Don't touch that. Focus. Be careful. From the father's perspective, he is teaching discipline. From the child's perspective, he is constantly failing. Now, what happens next? The child starts ignoring, avoiding, disconnecting, not because he is lazy, but because he is overwhelmed. This is where most parents misunderstand behavior. They try to increase control, but what is actually needed is to rebuild emotional safety. Let me ask you something important. When your child listens to you, do they feel safe or do they feel pressure? Because this feeling determines everything. Children listen best not when they are afraid, but when they feel respected, seen, and emotionally secure. Now here is the paradox. The more you try to control behavior, the less control you actually have. And the more you invest in connection, the more natural cooperation becomes. So what is the solution? It is not complicated, but it requires awareness. First, reduce unnecessary instructions. Not everything needs correction. Choose what truly matters. Second, replace repetition with action. Say it once, then follow through calmly. No emotions, no escalation, just consistency. Third, shorten your communication. Clear, direct, confident. No long lectures. Fourth, balance correction with recognition. If you correct 10 times, you must acknowledge at least 10 times. Good job. I noticed that. That was responsible. This rewires the child's brain from defense to cooperation. And finally, build connection daily. Not through control, but through presence. Talk. Listen. Be interested. Because a child who feels connected wants to listen, not because they have to, but because the relationship matters. Now, let's bring everything together. Children do not randomly stop listening. They learn patterns. They read emotional signals. They adapt to inconsistency. They react to pressure. And they respond to connection. So the real shift is this. Stop asking, why doesn't my child listen? Start asking,
What is my behavior teaching my child? Because your child is always learning, every day, from every interaction. And once you change the system, everything changes with it. Less shouting, less stress, less conflict, more understanding, more respect, more calm, and most importantly, a stronger relationship. Because in the end, listening is not about control. It is about connection. And when connection is strong, listening becomes natural, not forced. And that is what truly defines a healthy family.